Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is The Underground Railroad. We're going to talk about 5 things that, as you read more about this topic, keying in on them will be helpful for you to understand the topic a little more effectively. Let's get into it. The first thing for us to know a little more about would be myths. History has its fair share of myths, and it's important for us to dispel them. When it comes to the Underground Railroad, there are a lot of the myths. The most common would be that it's an actual railroad. It wasn't. The Underground Railroad was the process whereby aid could be given to an enslaved person who was attempting to escape and achieve freedom. That aid could come in the form of individuals who traveled to help them assist in escaping, or individuals kind of along the way who would provide them aid and comfort, or who would shield them from authorities or slave catchers or this kind of thing. Sometimes it could be structured, sometimes it was not, sometimes it could be violent assistance, right, this kind of thing, but other cases it could not. Again, it's not an actual railroad. Secondly, everyone helped. Nope. Common myth that I will hear and that is spoken about and written about is that largely the Underground Railroad was an incredibly popular thing across the quote-unquote North, in that most white individuals actively supported abolitionism in some way, shape, or form and did all that they could to help achieve freedom for those who were escaping. No, they didn't. Abolitionism had moments and pockets of popularity in different parts and communities around the United States in the years leading up to the Civil War. It was not a normalized, popular view or process for many. It was, in many ways, relatively radical. It was not the norm, and there were laws against it. This is why the Underground Railroad was quote-unquote underground, because helping could well let someone end up in prison. So everyone helped. We'd like to think that, but they didn't. Secondly, Fugitive Slave Act. Fugitive slave laws existed on the books prior to the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. But the law in 1850 that emerged out of the Compromise of 1850 put teeth to those laws and kind of upped the prosecution for individuals who provided assistance to escaping slaves. That laid bare the realities of the role of the state as it related to enslavement and violence, and it led, of course, to greater assistance in some ways on the part of those kinds of organizations and individuals who provided assistance on the Underground Railroad. Examples of figures who maybe we should look to would be our third point, and that would be someone like maybe William Still, who was very actively involved in the Underground Railroad, especially as a conductor around Philadelphia. He provided assistance to escape a number of escaping slaves, protecting them from slave catchers, and then eventually, when the Civil War is over, actually writes a history of the Underground Railroad, which was really important. Now, another individual who we should know, and this would perhaps be our fourth point, of course, would be Harriet Tubman. She's perhaps the most noted conductor in the Underground Railroad. She brings over something like 300 people to freedom over the course of like 10 years, and not a single individual is lost or dies sort of en route. She's eventually involved with the Civil War as well. So she's an incredibly important figure to understanding the power of women and race, especially at this time, and her role is central to really understanding the role of violence that existed here in this period and what these individuals were facing. So I guess the fifth thing then would be process and figures, right? So the process varied depending on where someone was enslaved, the route that they would need to take in order to get free. Because remember, enslaved people needed to carve out their own multiple identities, both to themselves, their owners, other white people, and fellow slaves. If you let other slaves know that you were going to attempt to escape, what if one of them informs on you, right? That kind of thing. So the process varied widely. And there are stops, quote unquote, or stations along the Underground Railroad that historians are still unpacking and discovering even today. In Illinois, some of them did exist. So, for example, Grau Mill, Graue, right, was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Wheaton College, was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Right, there are a number of these in the Chicago suburbs alone. In terms of those who experienced it, you're looking at this being a process where it's mostly men in many cases, and the numbers is somewhere between. Again, the figures vary. We don't know because not everybody wanted to announce this process. So somewhere between 20 and 100,000. So it could be more, could be less. But the debate over that continues. All right. Thanks so much.